Hello everyone! If you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
The Italian dinner clock. Picture this. You are standing in a bright, sprawling kitchen in suburban America. Your hands dusted with flour from rolling out fresh pasta dough. Because in your soul, you're still Italian and pasta is not a meal. It is a religion. When your American husband walks through the door at 4:15 p.m. and cheerfully announces, "Honey, I'm starving. What's for dinner?" You blink. You look at the clock. You look outside at the sun, which is still blazing like it's the middle of the afternoon. You look back at your husband, and you genuinely wonder if he has lost his mind. Dinner? You repeat, your Italian accent curling around the word like a warm embrace. It's 4 in the afternoon. We just had lunch 3 hours ago. Are you joking? But he is not joking. He is completely serious. And that is the exact moment when your beautifully constructed Italian world, a world where dinner is a sacred, hours-long ritual that begins no earlier than 8:30 p.m. and often stretches past 10 p.m., where the table is laden with antipasti, primi, secondi, and dolce, where the conversation flows as freely as the wine, and where the very concept of rushing through a meal is considered a cultural crime, comes crashing headfirst into the bewildering, fast-paced, utterly incomprehensible reality of American dinner time. Welcome to America, where families eat at 5 p.m. and your Italian stomach has no idea what hit it. If you are watching this video right now, I know exactly what you are feeling. Maybe you are an English learner who has just moved to the United States, or maybe you are simply curious about American culture. Or maybe you are someone who, like me, has experienced that jarring moment when you realize that everything you thought you knew about daily life is completely wrong. Whatever brought you here, I want you to know that you are not alone. I have been exactly where you are, standing in a foreign kitchen, surrounded by foreign customs, feeling like an alien in a world that makes no sense. And I want to tell you a story. A story about culture shock, about love, about marriage, about family, and about the one thing that brought it all together, a simple, seemingly innocent question about what time to eat dinner. Because let me tell you something, in Italy, dinner is not just a meal. It is an event. It is a performance. It is a celebration of life itself. My grandmother used to say that the table is the heart of the Italian home, and she was absolutely right. Growing up in Rome, dinner was the highlight of my day. We would gather around the table at 8:30 p.m., sometimes 9 p.m., and we would stay there for hours. We would talk about everything: politics, family gossip, the neighbor's new car, the latest football match. We would laugh, we would argue, we would tell stories. And the food, oh, the food. It would come in waves, each course more delicious than the last. By the time we finished, the clock would be approaching midnight, and we would feel perfectly content, perfectly full, perfectly connected to each other. That was dinner. That was life. That was everything I knew. Now fast forward to my first year in America. I had married a wonderful American man, kind, patient, loving, and we had settled into a lovely home in a quiet suburban neighborhood. I thought I was prepared for the cultural differences. I had watched American movies, read American books, practiced my English until I could speak it fluently. Well, mostly fluently. My accent still gives me away every time. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the shock of American dinner time. The first time my mother-in-law invited us for dinner, she said, "Come over at 5 p.m. And I thought, 5 p.m.? That's not dinner. That's an afternoon snack. That's when Italians have a coffee and a little pastry. That's when we're still at work, for goodness sake." I arrived at her house at 5 p.m., still full from lunch, completely confused about why everyone was sitting at the table with plates of food in front of them. And then I watched in utter disbelief as they ate an entire meal, meat, vegetables, potatoes, everything, in about 20 minutes. 20 minutes. In Italy, we would barely have finished the antipasti in 20 minutes. We would still be deciding which wine to open. We would still be catching up on each other's lives. But here, in this American household, dinner was over before it had even begun. I looked at my watch. It was 5:25 p.m. The meal was finished. The plates were being cleared. And I thought, what just happened? Did I miss something? Is this a prank? Are they going to bring out the real dinner later? But no, that was it. That was dinner. And I sat there, completely stunned, wondering if I had accidentally stepped into some kind of parallel universe where time moved at a different speed. That night, I went home and I could not stop thinking about it. I asked my husband, is this normal? Do Americans really eat dinner at 5 p.m.? Why so early? What's the rush? Don't you want to enjoy your food? Don't you want to spend time together? He looked at me with genuine confusion and said, but we do spend time together. We eat together. We talk. What's the problem? And I realized then that we were speaking two different languages, not English and Italian, but two entirely different cultural languages. For him, dinner was a functional activity. You eat, you clean up, you move on with your evening. For me, dinner was an experience. You savor, you linger, you connect. Neither of us was wrong. We were just different. And that difference, my friends, is what this entire story is about. Because here's the thing that I eventually learned after months of confusion, frustration, and more than a few arguments about what time we should sit down to eat. The 5 p.m. dinner is not just a quirky American habit. It is a window into a whole different way of living. It is shaped by work schedules, by school schedules, by the needs of children, by the rhythm of American life. In America, the workday typically runs from 9 to 5, and people want to come home, eat, and then have time for everything else, helping with homework, going to soccer practice, taking a walk, watching a movie, or simply relaxing before bed. In suburban areas especially, families lean toward eating around 5 p.m. It is practical. It is efficient. And for many Americans, it is completely normal, so normal that they cannot even imagine doing it any other way. But for me, an Italian woman raised on late-night feasts and leisurely meals, it felt like a betrayal of everything I had ever known. I felt like I was losing a part of myself. I felt like I was betraying my grandmother, my mother, my entire heritage. And yet, I was also deeply curious. Why did Americans eat so early? Was there a reason beyond just convenience? Was there something I was missing? I started researching. I read articles about the science of eating early, about how it can improve sleep and digestion. I talked to other immigrants, other women who had married into American families, and I listened to their stories. Some of them had adapted easily. Some of them, like me, had struggled. And some of them had found a way to bridge the gap, to honor their own cultural traditions while also embracing their new American lives. I wanted to be one of those people. I wanted to find a way to make it work. But first, I had to understand. I had to ask the hard questions. I had to confront my own assumptions. And I had to be willing to change, not to abandon who I was, but to grow into who I could become. So here's my question to you, the person watching this video right now. Have you ever experienced a moment like this? A moment where something so simple, something as simple as dinner time, made you feel like a stranger in your own life? If you have, then you know exactly what I am talking about. And if you haven't, then I invite you to come with me on this journey. Because this story is not just about dinner. It is about love. It is about marriage. It is about finding common ground when everything feels foreign. It is about learning to see the world through someone else's eyes. And yes, it is about learning English because every conversation, every argument, every laugh, every tear, Every single moment around that dinner table became an opportunity to practice, to listen, to speak, and to connect. The 5 p.m. dinner changed my clock. But more than that, it changed my life. And I want to tell you how. But before I go any further, let me ask you one more question. What time do you eat dinner? And more importantly, what does that time mean to you? Because the answer might surprise you. It certainly surprised me. And as we continue this story together, I promise you will see just how powerful a simple meal can be, how it can break down barriers, build bridges, and bring two completely different worlds together around one table. So stay with me, because this is just the beginning. La Dolce Vita versus American speed. Now, if you have ever been to Italy, or if you have ever dreamed of going there, you probably have some idea of what I am talking about when I say La Dolce Vita. It is not just a phrase. It is a philosophy. It is a way of moving through the world that says, slow down, savor this moment, enjoy the people around you, and never, under any circumstances, rush through a meal. In Italy, a meal is not fuel. It is not something you shove into your mouth between meetings or while checking your phone. It is a sacred ritual, a daily celebration, a time when the world stops and all that matters is the food, the wine, and the company. A typical Italian dinner starts late, around 8:30 or 9 p.m., and it lasts for hours. You start with antipasti, small bites that tease your palate. Then comes the primo, pasta, risotto, or soup, the heart of the meal. Then the secondo, the main course, usually meat or fish, accompanied by contorni or side dishes. And finally, the dolce, dessert, followed by coffee, followed by digestivo, followed by more conversation, more laughter, more stories. By the time you leave the table, it is well past midnight, and you feel like you have just experienced something beautiful, something meaningful, something that connected you to your family, your culture, and yourself. That is what I grew up with. That is what I knew. That is what I loved. So when I arrived in America and discovered that dinner was not only served at 5 p.m., but was also devoured in 20 minutes flat, I felt like someone had taken my entire cultural identity and thrown it into a blender. I kept asking myself, where is the joy? Where is the connection? Where is the ritual? All I saw was efficiency, people eating quickly, clearing their plates, and moving on to the next activity as if the meal had been nothing more than a pit stop on the highway of life. And honestly, it broke my heart a little. I remember sitting at that first American dinner table, staring at my plate, thinking about my grandmother's kitchen in Rome, about the smell of garlic and tomatoes simmering for hours, about the sound of my father's voice telling stories that seemed to go on forever. And I felt a deep, aching nostalgia for something I was afraid I had lost forever. But here's the thing that I did not understand at first. The 5 p.m. dinner was not a rejection of family or connection. It was simply a different way of achieving the same goals: love, togetherness, and care for one another. It just looked different. It worked on a different schedule. And that schedule, I eventually realized, was shaped by the unique rhythm of American life, a rhythm that I had not yet learned to dance to. In Italy, everything moves slowly. Shops close for a few hours in the afternoon. People take long lunches. Evenings stretch endlessly into the night. But in America, life moves faster. People work long hours. Children have school and extracurricular activities. Parents have commutes that can take an hour or more each way. There are schedules to keep, appointments to attend, and bedtime routines that cannot be pushed back indefinitely. For many American families, the 5 p.m. dinner is not a choice. It is a practical necessity. By 5 p.m., everyone is home, or almost everyone, and it is the only time of day when the whole family can be together before the chaos of evening activities begins. If they waited until 8 or 9 p.m. to eat, the children would be too tired to eat properly, too irritable to enjoy the meal, and too exhausted to have any meaningful conversation. And so they adapted. They found a way to make it work. And what I initially dismissed as rushing was actually a different kind of intentionality, a different way of prioritizing family time, just at a different hour of the day. I remember having a conversation with my husband about this early in our marriage. I was frustrated. I felt like he did not care about the ritual of eating, about the joy of lingering over a meal. And he, in turn, felt frustrated because he felt like I was rejecting his culture, his family's traditions, his way of life. We both felt misunderstood. We both felt defensive. And then something shifted. I started to ask questions, not accusatory questions, but curious ones. I asked him, "What was dinner like when you were a child?" And he told me about his mother, who worked full-time and still managed to have a hot meal on the table by 5:30 p.m. every single day. He told me about how his family would sit together and share stories about their day, how his father would ask about school, how they would laugh and argue and connect, all before the sun went down. And then, after dinner, they would have the rest of the evening to relax, to play board games, to watch television together, to read, or just to be together. That sounded beautiful to me. It sounded different from my Italian experience, yes, but it was not less meaningful. It was just different. And that realization was the beginning of my transformation. I started to see that the 5 p.m. dinner was not the enemy of my Italian heritage. It was simply a new context, a new stage on which I could express the same values that I had grown up with. Could I make Italian food? Of course. Could I make the meal last longer, add more courses, turn it into a mini ritual? Absolutely. Could I bring the warmth, the laughter, and the connection of an Italian dinner table to the American 5 p.m. schedule? Yes, I could. And that became my mission. I would not abandon la Dolce Vita. I would bring it with me, adapt it, and share it with my new American family. I would teach them to appreciate the beauty of a slow meal, even if it started at 5 p.m. And in turn, I would learn to appreciate the beauty of their rhythm, the after-dinner walks in the twilight, the game nights, the quiet evenings spent together in the living room. But let me be honest with you, it was not easy. There were moments when I felt like giving up, like I was betraying my roots. There were moments when my Italian stomach, my Italian soul, cried out in protest. There were moments when I missed the late-night dinners of Rome so much that it hurt physically. And yet, slowly, something began to shift inside me. I started to see the benefits of eating early. I noticed that I slept better. I noticed that I had more energy in the evenings. I noticed that the time after dinner, the time I used to spend just sitting at the table, was now filled with other beautiful moments. Reading bedtime stories to my children, having quiet conversations with my husband, watching the sunset from our porch. It was a different kind of beauty, but it was beauty nonetheless. And I began to realize that the 5 p.m. dinner had changed my clock, not just my eating clock, but my entire rhythm of life. It had forced me to slow down in a different way, to find joy in a different order of things. So here's what I want you to know, whether you are an English learner, a new immigrant, or just someone curious about cultural differences. The clash between two cultures is not a battle to be won or lost. It is an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to become something more than you were before. The 5 p.m. dinner taught me that. It taught me that love and connection can happen at any hour of the day. It taught me that tradition is not a cage, but a foundation, a starting point from which you can build something new. And it taught me that the most important thing about a meal is not what time you eat it, but who you share it with. So yes, my Italian heart still aches for the long, late dinners of Rome. But my American life has given me something equally precious, A family that gathers around the table every night at 5 p.m., ready to eat, ready to talk, ready to love. And that, my friends, is a beautiful thing. But what about the science behind all of this? Is there a reason why eating early is actually good for you? And how did my Italian stomach finally learn to accept this new schedule? That is exactly what I want to explore next. First invitation. 5 p.m. dinner? Now, let me tell you about the very first time I received an official invitation to an American dinner at 5 p.m. Because that moment is seared into my memory, like a brand on my soul. It was my mother-in-law, Susan, a lovely, warm-hearted woman with a gentle smile and a voice that always sounded like she was about to offer you a cup of tea, who called me on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of unpacking boxes in our new suburban home, my hands covered in dust from old newspapers and packing tape. When my phone buzzed with her name on the screen, I answered with a cheerful, "Hello, Susan." And she responded with that sweet, melodic American voice of hers. "Hi, sweetheart. I was wondering if you and Michael would like to come over for dinner this Saturday. We're having pot roast, and I'd love to see you both." My heart swelled with warmth. I had only been in America for a few months, and I was still getting to know my new family. An invitation to dinner felt like an embrace, a gesture of inclusion, a sign that I was truly being welcomed into this family. And then she said the words that would change everything. "We usually eat around 5 p.m. Does that work for you?" I paused. I looked at the clock on the wall. It read 2:15 p.m. I looked at my husband, who was in the next room, blissfully unaware of the crisis that was unfolding in my mind. 5 p.m.? Dinner? Did I hear her correctly? No, I must have misheard. She must have meant 5 p.m. for something else, maybe a pre-dinner drink or a snack or I don't know, a prelude to the actual dinner? So I did what any polite Italian woman would do. I smiled through the phone and said, "Of course, Susan. 5 p.m. sounds wonderful." But inside, my brain was screaming. I hung up the phone and stood there in the middle of the living room, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, my heart pounding with a mixture of confusion and dread. I walked into the room where my husband was assembling a bookshelf and said, very calmly, or at least I tried to be calm, "Michael, your mother just invited us to dinner at 5 p.m. He looked up, smiled, and said, "Great. I love her pot roast." I stared at him. "Michael, 5 p.m. is the middle of the afternoon. That is not dinner time. That is snack time. That is merenda time. That is when Italians have a coffee and a biscotti. Not an entire meal with pot roast and vegetables and whatever else your mother is planning to serve." He put down his screwdriver, looked at me with that patient expression that I would come to know so well over the years, and said, "Honey, that's just what time we eat. My family has always eaten dinner at 5 p.m. It's normal. It's fine. You'll get used to it." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that this was not normal, this was not fine, and I was absolutely certain I would never, ever get used to eating a full meal while the sun was still high in the sky, while birds were still chirping, while people were still walking their dogs and mowing their lawns and doing all the things that people do in the afternoon when they are not supposed to be eating dinner. But I didn't scream. I took a deep breath, the kind of deep breath that my grandmother taught me to take before I said something I would regret, and I said, "Okay, we'll go. We'll eat at 5 p.m. I will survive." And then I spent the next 3 days obsessing over this single question. What do you wear to a 5 p.m. dinner? In Italy, dinner at 8:30 or 9 p.m. is a formal affair. You dress nicely. You put on makeup. You might even wear heels. The table is set with care, cloth napkins, candles, the good china. The meal is an event, and you dress for the event. But 5 p.m.? That is a time for casual clothes. That is jeans and a t-shirt territory. That is barely post-work, still in your office clothes time. What on earth was I supposed to wear? I asked my husband and he laughed. He actually laughed. He said, "Honey, it's just dinner at my mom's house. Wear whatever you want. She doesn't care." But I cared. I cared because I was Italian, and to an Italian, dinner is never just dinner. It is a performance. It is a statement. It is a way of showing respect to your host, your family, your culture. And I was not about to show up to my mother-in-law's house looking like I had just rolled out of bed, even if the meal was happening at an ungodly hour. Finally, Saturday arrived, and I spent the entire day preparing. I took a long shower. I carefully selected an outfit, a lovely sundress that seemed appropriate for the warm afternoon sun. I put on light makeup, just enough to look polished, but not overdone. I brought a bottle of Italian wine as a gift, because in Italy, you never show up empty-handed, and I wanted to share a piece of my culture with them. We arrived at Susan's house at exactly 4:45 p.m., because I had learned that being on time in America meant being precisely on time. Not 15 minutes late like in Italy, where arriving early can be considered rude because it puts pressure on the host to be ready before they are ready. Susan opened the door with a huge smile, hugged me warmly, and said, "Come in, come in. Dinner is almost ready." I stepped inside, and I was immediately enveloped by the most incredible smell. Beef simmering in gravy, roasted vegetables, something with garlic and herbs. My Italian nose recognized good food, and it forgave the early hour, at least temporarily. I walked into the dining room, and I saw the table. It was set beautifully, not with the formal china and crystal of an Italian dinner, but with a casual elegance that was unmistakably American. There were placemats, simple plates, and a centerpiece of fresh flowers. It was lovely. It was welcoming. It was just the right amount of effort for 5 p.m. And then we sat down. At exactly 5 p.m., the meal was placed on the table. A huge pot roast, perfectly cooked, surrounded by carrots and potatoes. Steaming hot and smelling like heaven. There was a basket of warm bread, a salad with a light vinaigrette, and a pitcher of iced tea on the side. Susan said grace, a sweet prayer of thanks for the food and the family, and then she said, "Help yourselves." And everyone, my husband, his father, his younger brother, his aunt, and his cousin, everyone immediately started reaching for the food, piling their plates high, and then, to my utter shock, they started eating. I mean, really eating. Fast. Like they were in a race. I sat there, fork in hand, watching as my new family devoured their dinner in what felt like record time. I took a bite of the pot roast. It was delicious. Absolutely delicious. But I could not stop staring at the clock on the wall. 5:07 p.m. 7 minutes into the meal, and some people had already finished half their plates. In Italy, at 5:07 p.m., we would still be opening the wine and discussing the weather. We would not even have touched the antipasti yet. I forced myself to eat at a normal pace, savoring each bite, trying to enjoy the meal despite the chaos unfolding around me. But my mind was racing. Who eats this fast? Why is there no conversation? Where is the ritual? And then, at 5:25 p.m., the meal was over. The plates were cleared. Susan was asking if anyone wanted dessert. I looked at my watch, and I felt like I had just been transported to another dimension. I had barely begun to eat, and the meal was already finished. I went home that night with 1,000 questions burning inside me. I felt like I had failed at something, like I had not quite understood how to participate in this strange cultural ritual. I felt embarrassed, confused, and a little bit sad. But I also felt curious. Why did Americans eat this way? What was the purpose? And could I ever learn to embrace it? That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and I promised myself that I would figure this out. I would not let this cultural difference defeat me. I would learn to navigate this strange new world of 5 p.m. dinners, even if it killed me. But first, I had to understand. And that understanding would take me on a journey far deeper than I ever expected. Because the 5 p.m. dinner was not just about food. It was about family. It was about tradition. It was about the very fabric of American life. And I was determined to weave myself into that fabric, one meal at a time. So the next day, I started asking questions. I started observing. And I started to see the 5 p.m. dinner in a whole new light. But that, my friends, is a story for the next section. My Italian stomach rebels. Now, let me tell you what happened the morning after that first 5 p.m. dinner, because this is where the real battle began. Not between me and my American in-laws, but between me and my own Italian stomach, my own Italian soul. My own deeply ingrained biological clock that had been ticking in perfect rhythm for over 30 years and was now being asked to completely recalibrate itself in the name of cross-cultural harmony. I woke up at 7 a.m., as I always did, and I immediately felt something was wrong. My stomach was growling. Not a gentle, polite growl, but a full-blown, theatrical, operatic growl. The kind of growl that would have made my grandmother cross herself and say, "Santa Maria, this girl is hungry." But how could I be hungry? I had eaten a full dinner at 5 p.m., and even though I had eaten slowly and savored every bite, I had consumed a substantial amount of food, pot roast, vegetables, bread, salad, and yes, I had even had a slice of apple pie for dessert because I did not want to be rude. By the time I went to bed at 10 p.m., my stomach was comfortably full. So why was I waking up with the hunger of a woman who had not eaten in days? I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling my stomach churn and gurgle like a restless volcano. And I realized with a jolt of horror that my body was not on American time. My body was still on Italian time, still expecting to eat dinner at 9 p.m., still expecting to go to bed on a full stomach that had been filled just a few hours before sleep, still expecting to wake up with a gentle, manageable appetite, not this ravenous, desperate hunger that felt like I had been abandoned on a desert island for a week. I got up, stumbled to the kitchen, and ate a bowl of cereal at 7:15 a.m. Then I ate a second bowl at 8:30 a.m. Then I ate a third bowl at 10 a.m. By noon, I was starving again. By 2 p.m., I was pacing the kitchen like a caged animal, opening the refrigerator every 15 minutes, hoping that something new and delicious had magically appeared since the last time I opened it. By 4 p.m., I was practically vibrating with hunger, my hands shaking slightly as I chopped vegetables for a snack that I knew would not sustain me. And then, at exactly 5 p.m., I looked at the clock, I looked at my husband, and I said the words that would become my mantra for the next several weeks. I am not hungry. That was the beginning of the rebellion. My Italian stomach, my Italian soul, my entire Italian identity rose up in protest and said, "No. We do not eat dinner at 5 p.m. We do not eat a full meal while the sun is still shining. We do not rush through our food like it is a chore. And we absolutely, positively do not go to bed hungry. If we must eat at this ridiculous hour, then we will eat again later. We will have a second dinner. We will have a midnight snack. We will, by God, find a way to satisfy the hunger that this absurd American schedule has created." And so began my secret life of second dinners. I would eat the 5 p.m. meal with my family, smiling and making conversation, pretending that everything was perfectly normal. And then, at around 9 p.m., when everyone else was settled into the living room, watching television or reading books or playing board games, I would sneak into the kitchen and make myself a proper Italian meal, a plate of pasta with garlic and olive oil, or a sandwich with fresh mozzarella and tomatoes, or simply a bowl of soup that reminded me of my mother's kitchen. I would eat it quickly, furtively, guiltily, like a teenager sneaking a cigarette behind the school gym. I would stand at the counter, hunched over my plate, and I would whisper to myself in Italian, "This is not right. This is not normal. This is not who I am." But here's the thing that I did not understand at the time. My stomach was not just being stubborn. It was not just being difficult. It was actually telling me something important about how my body worked, about how human digestion works, about the intricate dance between our eating habits and our biological clocks. You see, our bodies are not machines that we can program at will. They are living systems, shaped by evolution, by genetics, by years and years of habit, and by something called the circadian rhythm, that internal clock that regulates everything from sleep to hormone production to digestion. My body had spent 30 years expecting to eat at certain times, and it had developed a rhythm to match. My digestive system produced stomach acid at certain hours, released digestive enzymes at certain hours, and slowed down at certain hours, all in anticipation of the meals it expected to receive. When I suddenly changed the timing of those meals, when I ate dinner 4 hours earlier than usual, my body did not know what to do. It was confused. It was disoriented. It was like a musician who had been playing in one key for decades and was suddenly asked to play in a completely different key without any time to practice or adjust. Of course it rebelled. Of course it protested. Of course it made me feel hungry at weird times and full at weird times and generally miserable all the time. My body was not being difficult. It was being honest. It was telling me, loudly and clearly, that change takes time and that you cannot rush biology no matter how much you want to. And this, my friends, is where the real lesson began. Because I realized that I had two choices. I could continue fighting my body, continuing sneaking second dinners, continuing feeling like a failure every time I got hungry at 9 p.m. Or I could accept the reality of the situation and start working with my body instead of against it. I could acknowledge that my Italian stomach was not going to change overnight, that it needed time to adjust, that it needed patience and kindness and a gradual, gentle transition to this new schedule. So I started making changes, small changes, almost imperceptible changes. I started eating a slightly smaller breakfast so that I would be hungrier by lunchtime. I started eating a slightly lighter lunch so that I would be hungrier by 5 p.m. I started making sure that I had a small snack, a piece of fruit, a handful of nuts around 3 p.m. just to tide me over until the 5 p.m. dinner. And I started eating my 5 p.m. meals more slowly, more deliberately, giving my body time to recognize the food, time to feel full, time to adjust to the new rhythm. It was not easy. There were days when I felt like giving up. Days when I was so hungry at 9 p.m. that I would have traded my grandmother's secret pasta recipe for a single slice of bread. But I kept going. I kept trying. And slowly, gradually, almost imperceptibly, my body started to change. The growling at 9 p.m. became softer, then quieter, then almost silent. The hunger at 5 p.m. became more pronounced, then stronger, then unmistakable. I started to feel hungry at 4 p.m., then 3:30 p.m., then 3 p.m. My Italian stomach was learning. It was adapting. It was becoming American. But let me be perfectly honest with you. The transition was not just physical. It was emotional. It was psychological. It was deeply, profoundly tied to my identity as an Italian woman. As someone who had grown up believing that the late dinner was not just a habit, but a sacred tradition, a cultural inheritance that could not be discarded without losing a piece of myself. Every time I sat down to eat at 5 p.m., I felt like I was betraying my grandmother. Every time I finished my meal before the sun had set, I felt like I was abandoning my heritage. Every time I looked at the clock at 9 p.m. and realized that I was not hungry, I felt a strange mixture of pride and loss. Pride that I was adapting, and loss of the person I used to be. But here is what I eventually realized after weeks of struggle and confusion and self-doubt. I was not losing my Italian identity. I was expanding it. I was adding a new layer to it. I was becoming a more complex, more nuanced, more adaptable version of myself. I could still be Italian and eat dinner at 5 p.m. I could still love pasta and eat it at 4 p.m. I could still honor my grandmother's recipes and serve them at times that would have made her raise her eyebrows in disbelief. The traditions were not lost. They were just transformed. They were woven into a new fabric, a new life, a new rhythm. And that transformation was not a loss. It was a gift. Because it taught me something that I had never truly understood before. We are not defined by our habits. We are defined by our love. And love, as I was about to discover, does not care what time you eat dinner. So if you are watching this video right now, and you are struggling with a similar transition, whether it is adjusting to a new culture, learning a new language, or simply trying to change a deeply ingrained habit, I want you to know that it is okay to struggle. It is okay to feel confused and frustrated, and even a little bit sad. It is okay to sneak second dinners and feel guilty about them. It is okay to have days when you feel like giving up. Because change is hard. Change takes time. Change requires patience and kindness, and a willingness to forgive yourself when you fall short. But if you keep going, if you keep trying, if you keep showing up at that table even when you are not hungry, something amazing will happen. Your body will learn. Your mind will adjust. Your heart will open. And before you know it, the thing that seemed impossible will become natural, and the habit that seemed foreign will become home. That is what the 5 p.m. dinner taught me. That is what I want to share with you. But there is more to this story, so much more, because my Italian stomach was not the only thing that needed to adjust. My American husband, his family, and all of our complicated, beautiful, messy relationships were also navigating this strange, new territory. And that, my friends, is what we will explore next. The science behind early dinners. Now, let me pause the story for a moment and zoom out from my Italian-American kitchen drama. Because what I discovered during those weeks of hunger and confusion was something that completely changed how I understood not just American culture, but my own body, my own health, and my own relationship with food in ways that I never could have anticipated. You see, after weeks of sneaking second dinners, after weeks of waking up at 7 a.m. with a growling stomach and going to bed at 11 p.m. feeling like I had not eaten enough, after weeks of feeling like my body was betraying me and my culture was slipping away, I finally did what any reasonable, curious, slightly desperate person would do. I started researching. I opened my laptop, I typed eating dinner early benefits into the search bar, and I fell down a rabbit hole of scientific studies, medical journals, and health articles that completely transformed my understanding of the 5 p.m. dinner. And let me tell you, what I found shocked me to my core. I had been so focused on the cultural shock, so consumed by the emotional turmoil of abandoning my Italian dinner traditions, that I had completely overlooked the possibility that the 5 p.m. dinner might actually be, gasp, good for me. Not just tolerable, not just acceptable, but genuinely beneficial for my health, my sleep, my digestion, and my overall well-being. It was a revelation that hit me like a ton of bricks, and it made me look at my mother-in-law's dinner table with entirely new eyes. Let me share with you what I discovered. Because this is the part of the story that I think will genuinely surprise you, and maybe even change how you think about your own dinner habits. Whether you are American, Italian, or anything in between. It turns out that the timing of our meals is not just a cultural preference or a personal habit. It is deeply connected to the biology of our bodies, specifically to something called the circadian rhythm. Now, you have probably heard of the circadian rhythm in the context of sleep. It is the internal clock that tells you when to wake up and when to go to bed, regulating the release of hormones like melatonin and cortisol throughout the day. But did you know that your digestive system has its own circadian rhythm? It does. Your stomach, your intestines, your pancreas, and your liver all have internal clocks that regulate when they produce digestive enzymes, when they absorb nutrients, and when they slow down in preparation for rest. When you eat at times that align with your body's natural digestive rhythm, everything works smoothly and efficiently. But when you eat at times that conflict with that rhythm, like eating a heavy meal late at night, when your digestive system is already winding down for sleep, you can experience all kinds of problems, from indigestion and acid reflux to poor nutrient absorption and disrupted sleep. And this is where the 5 p.m. dinner starts to make a whole lot of scientific sense. You see, the human body is designed to digest food most efficiently during the daylight hours, when our metabolism is at its peak and our digestive enzymes are most active. As the sun goes down, our bodies naturally begin to slow down, preparing for rest and recovery. Eating a heavy meal late at night forces your digestive system to work overtime while it is trying to rest, which can lead to a cascade of negative effects. Studies have shown that people who eat dinner earlier in the evening tend to have better sleep quality, fewer digestive issues, and even healthier weight management compared to people who eat late at night. One study that I found particularly fascinating followed two groups of people. One group that ate dinner before 7 p.m. and another group that ate dinner after 9 p.m. And it found that the early dinner group had significantly lower blood sugar levels, better insulin sensitivity, and lower levels of inflammation markers, all of which are associated with reduced risk of chronic diseases like diabetes, heart disease, and obesity. Another study found that eating dinner at 5 p.m. instead of 8 p.m. can increase fat burning during sleep, because your body has already finished digesting your meal and can focus on burning stored fat for energy rather than trying to process the food you just ate. I read these studies, I looked at my own body, and I thought, so all those years of eating pasta at 9 p.m., was I doing it wrong all along? Now, I am not saying that the Italian way of eating is wrong. I am not saying that my grandmother's beautiful, leisurely late dinners were bad for her health. She lived to be 92 after all, so clearly she was doing something right. But what I realized is that the Italian way of eating is not just about the time of day, it is also about the quality of the food, the way it is prepared, the pace at which it is consumed, and the social context in which it is enjoyed. When Italians eat late dinners, they are eating fresh, whole foods that have been slowly and carefully prepared. They are eating in a relaxed, unhurried environment, often with family and friends, and they are staying at the table for hours, giving their bodies plenty of time to digest each course before the next one arrives. In America, the 5 p.m. dinner is often quite different. It is faster, more functional, and sometimes less focused on the quality of the food and more focused on the convenience of the schedule. But here is the key insight that I eventually reached. The ideal approach is not to choose one culture's way over the other, but to combine the best of both worlds. Take the American timing, the earlier dinner that supports better sleep and digestion, and infuse it with the Italian spirit, the care, the quality, the joy, the connection that makes a meal truly nourishing in every sense of the word. And that, my friends, is exactly what I set out to do. I started experimenting with my 5 p.m. dinners, transforming them from quick, functional meals into slow, meaningful experiences that honored both my Italian heritage and my new American life. I started cooking Italian food for my 5 p.m. dinners, not heavy, rich dishes that would weigh me down, but light, fresh, Mediterranean-inspired meals that were both delicious and easy on my digestive system. I started making pasta with fresh vegetables and olive oil, grilled fish with lemon and herbs, salads with vibrant colors and bold flavors. I started setting the table with care, using cloth napkins and nice plates, lighting candles even though the sun was still shining outside. I started slowing down the pace of the meal, encouraging conversation and laughter and connection, making the 5 p.m. dinner feel less like a pit stop and more like a celebration. And you know what happened? My family loved it. My husband, who had grown up eating fast 5 p.m. dinners, suddenly found himself lingering at the table, asking for seconds, telling stories about his day. His mother, my mother-in-law, started asking me for my Italian recipes, and she even started making her own versions of them for her 5 p.m. dinners. The 5 p.m. dinner, which had once felt like a betrayal of my identity, became a bridge between two cultures, a way of sharing the best of both worlds with the people I loved. But here's the thing that really blew my mind. As I started eating healthier, lighter 5 p.m. dinners, my body began to feel better than it had in years. I slept more deeply and woke up more refreshed. I had more energy during the day and fewer digestive issues. I even noticed that my cravings for unhealthy snacks and late-night desserts started to fade away, because my body was finally getting what it needed at the right times. The 5 p.m. dinner had not just changed my clock, it had changed my health. It had changed my relationship with food. It had changed my life. And I thought to myself, if I had known this years ago, I would have made the switch much sooner. But I also realized that I could not have made the switch sooner, because I needed to go through that journey of culture shock and emotional struggle to truly appreciate what I was gaining. I needed to fight with my Italian stomach and sneak my second dinners and feel like I was betraying my grandmother before I could fully embrace this new rhythm. The struggle was part of the process, and the process was part of the transformation. So now, when I look at the clock at 5 p.m. and feel that familiar hunger rising in my body, I do not feel like I am giving up something precious. I feel like I am gaining something new. I feel like I am making a choice that honors my health, my family, and my future, all while carrying the love and traditions of my past in my heart. And that, my friends, is a gift that I never expected to receive from a simple 5 p.m. dinner. But there is more to this story, so much more, because the science of early dinners was only the beginning. The real transformation came when I started to see how the 5 p.m. dinner could change not just my health, but my entire family dynamic, my marriage, and my relationship with my American in-laws. And that is exactly what I want to share with you next. My husband's American habits. Now, let me tell you about the man who turned my world upside down, the man who looked at me with those kind blue eyes and said, "Honey, it's just dinner," as if he had not just dismantled my entire cultural identity with those 4 simple words. My husband, Michael, is a good man, a kind, patient, loving man who has never once made me feel like I was wrong for being Italian, even when I was being absolutely insufferable about the whole 5 p.m. dinner situation. But in those early months of our marriage, when I was still reeling from the shock of early dinners and still sneaking my second meals at 9 p.m., I looked at him and I thought, how can you be so calm? How can you be so relaxed? How can you sit there and eat a full dinner at 5 p.m. and then go about your evening like nothing unusual has happened? And then I started asking him questions, real questions, not angry ones, not accusatory ones, but genuinely curious ones. I wanted to understand how he had grown up, what dinner had looked like in his childhood home, why this rhythm felt so natural to him when it felt so foreign to me. And the answers he gave me opened a window into a world that I had never fully understood. A world of American routines and family traditions that were just as meaningful and just as deeply rooted as my own Italian traditions, even if they looked completely different on the surface. Michael grew up in a typical American suburban household in the Midwest. His father was a factory worker who left for work at 5:30 a.m. and did not return home until 4:30 p.m. His mother, Susan, worked part-time at a local school, so she was usually home by 3 p.m. Dinner for his family was a sacred but simple ritual. At exactly 5 p.m., everyone gathered around the table. His father, who was already starving after a long day of physical labor, his mother, who had been cooking since 4 p.m., his younger brother, who was always running in from soccer practice, and Michael himself, who had just finished his homework and was ready to eat. They would sit together, his mother would say grace, and then they would eat. Not slowly, not lingering, but with a purposeful efficiency that came from years of practice. And then, after the meal was finished and the dishes were cleared, they would have the rest of the evening to relax, to play board games, to watch TV, to do homework, to talk about their days without the pressure of a meal still lingering on the table. For Michael, the 5 p.m. dinner was not a strange or foreign concept. It was home. It was comfort. It was the rhythm of his childhood, the heartbeat of his family life. And it never occurred to him to question it, just as it had never occurred to me to question the 9 p.m. dinners of my Italian childhood. When he told me these stories, something shifted inside me. I stopped seeing the 5 p.m. dinner as an attack on my culture and started seeing it as an invitation into his. I started to understand that his family's early dinners were not a rejection of connection or togetherness, but a different expression of the same values that my Italian family held dear: love, family, and the importance of coming together. It was just packaged differently. It happened at a different time. It moved at a different pace. But the heart of it, the desire to be together, to share a meal, to connect with the people you love, that was exactly the same. And that realization was profound for me, because it meant that I was not losing something precious by adapting to the 5 p.m. dinner. I was gaining something precious, a new way of being together, a new rhythm to share with my husband and his family, a new tradition that could combine the best of both worlds. But I also started to see the deeper patterns behind Michael's American habits, the ways that his upbringing had shaped not just his dinner schedule, but his entire relationship with food and family. For Michael, food was fuel, something you consumed to give you energy and keep you alive. He did not obsess over flavors and textures the way I did. He did not plan meals days in advance or spend hours researching the perfect recipe. He appreciated good food, certainly, but he did not feel the same deep, almost spiritual connection to it that I did. And at first, that difference frustrated me. I thought it meant he did not care, that he was not paying attention, that he was taking for granted something that I considered sacred. But over time, I began to see it differently. Michael's relationship with food was not shallow. It was just different. It was shaped by a childhood in which meals were practical and functional, but also loving and caring. His mother, Susan, may not have spent hours making complicated sauces or rolling fresh pasta, but she was there every single day, putting a hot meal on the table for her family. She was making sure they were fed and nourished and cared for. And that, I eventually realized, is exactly what love looks like, even if it does not wear the same Italian clothes that I grew up with. I remember a conversation I had with Susan about this, maybe 6 months into my 5 p.m. dinner transformation. I was feeling nostalgic one afternoon, missing my grandmother's kitchen and the late-night dinners of my childhood. And I confessed to Susan that I sometimes felt guilty for abandoning my Italian traditions. She looked at me with that gentle smile of hers and said, "Honey, you haven't abandoned your traditions. You've just made them your own. You're still Italian. You still cook Italian food. You still love your family. The only thing that's changed is the time on the clock. And you know what? She was right. I was still Italian. I was still cooking the recipes that my grandmother had taught me, still using the olive oil and garlic and fresh herbs that I grew up with, still sharing stories about my family and my culture with my new American family. The only difference was that I was doing it at 5 p.m. instead of 9 p.m. And that difference, I realized, was not a betrayal. It was an evolution. Michael's American habits were not something to be overcome or corrected. They were something to be understood and appreciated. They were a window into his world, into the childhood that had shaped him into the wonderful man I had married. And by learning to appreciate those habits, I was also learning to love him more deeply, to understand him more fully, to build a stronger and more resilient marriage. The 5 p.m. dinner taught me that. It taught me that love is not about being right or wrong, about having the correct traditions or the proper schedule. It is about showing up, being present, and sharing your life with the people you care about. It is about finding common ground, even when the ground beneath your feet feels foreign and strange. And it is about being willing to change, to adapt, to grow into something new and beautiful together. So, if you are watching this video right now, and you are struggling with cultural differences in your own relationships, whether it is dinner times or language barriers or any of the other 1,000 ways that two people can be different, I want you to know that it is okay to struggle. It is okay to feel frustrated and confused and even a little bit angry. But do not let those feelings close your heart. Stay curious. Ask questions. Listen to the stories of the people you love. And remember that every culture, every tradition, every habit has a history and a meaning that may not be immediately obvious. Take the time to understand. Take the time to appreciate. And take the time to find the common ground that will bring you closer together. Because at the end of the day, the 5 p.m. dinner is not just about food. It is about family. It is about love. It is about the beautiful, messy, complicated work of building a life with someone from a different world. And that, my friends, is a journey worth taking. But our story is not over yet, because the 5 p.m. dinner was about to teach me one more lesson, one that I never expected, and that would change everything I thought I knew about my. Now, let me tell you about the man who turned my world upside down, the man who looked at me with those kind blue eyes and said, "Honey, it's just dinner," as if he had not just dismantled my entire cultural identity with those 4 simple words. My husband, Michael, is a good man, a kind, patient, loving man who has never once made me feel like I was wrong for being Italian, even when I was being absolutely insufferable about the whole 5 p.m. dinner situation. But in those early months of our marriage, when I was still reeling from the shock of early dinners and still sneaking my second meals at 9 p.m., I looked at him and I thought, how can you be so calm? How can you be so relaxed? How can you sit there and eat a full dinner at 5 p.m. and then go about your evening like nothing unusual has happened? And then I started asking him questions, real questions, not angry ones, not accusatory ones, but genuinely curious ones. I wanted to understand how he had grown up, what dinner had looked like in his childhood home, why this rhythm felt so natural to him when it felt so foreign to me. And the answers he gave me opened a window into a world that I had never fully understood. A world of American routines and family traditions that were just as meaningful and just as deeply rooted as my own Italian traditions, even if they looked completely different on the surface. Michael grew up in a typical American suburban household in the Midwest. His father was a factory worker who left for work at 5:30 a.m. and did not return home until 4:30 p.m. His mother, Susan, worked part-time at a local school, so she was usually home by 3 p.m. Dinner for his family was a sacred but simple ritual. At exactly 5 p.m., Everyone gathered around the table. His father, who was already starving after a long day of physical labor. His mother, who had been cooking since 4 p.m., his younger brother, who was always running in from soccer practice, and Michael himself, who had just finished his homework and was ready to eat. They would sit together, his mother would say grace, and then they would eat. Not slowly, not lingering, but with a purposeful efficiency that came from years of practice. And then, after the meal was finished and the dishes were cleared, they would have the rest of the evening to relax, to play board games, to watch TV, to do homework, to talk about their days without the pressure of a meal still lingering on the table. For Michael, the 5 p.m. dinner was not a strange or foreign concept. It was home. It was comfort. It was the rhythm of his childhood, the heartbeat of his family life. And it never occurred to him to question it, just as it had never occurred to me to question the 9 p.m. dinners of my Italian childhood. When he told me these stories, something shifted inside me. I stopped seeing the 5 p.m. dinner as an attack on my culture and started seeing it as an invitation into his. I started to understand that his family's early dinners were not a rejection of connection or togetherness, but a different expression of the same values that my Italian family held dear: love, family, and the importance of coming together. It was just packaged differently. It happened at a different time. It moved at a different pace. But the heart of it, the desire to be together, to share a meal, to connect with the people you love, that was exactly the same. And that realization was profound for me, because it meant that I was not losing something precious by adapting to the 5 p.m. dinner. I was gaining something precious, a new way of being together, a new rhythm to share with my husband and his family, a new tradition that could combine the best of both worlds. But I also started to see the deeper patterns behind Michael's American habits, the ways that his upbringing had shaped not just his dinner schedule, but his entire relationship with food and family. For Michael, food was fuel, something you consume to give you energy and keep you alive. He did not obsess over flavors and textures the way I did. He did not plan meals days in advance or spend hours researching the perfect recipe. He appreciated good food, certainly, but he did not feel the same deep, almost spiritual connection to it that I did. And at first, that difference frustrated me. I thought it meant he did not care, that he was not paying attention, that he was taking for granted something that I considered sacred. But over time, I began to see it differently. Michael's relationship with food was not shallow. It was just different. It was shaped by a childhood in which meals were practical and functional, but also loving and caring. His mother, Susan, may not have spent hours making complicated sauces or rolling fresh pasta, but she was there every single day, putting a hot meal on the table for her family. She was making sure they were fed and nourished and cared for. And that, I eventually realized, is exactly what love looks like, even if it does not wear the same Italian clothes that I grew up with. I remember a conversation I had with Susan about this, maybe 6 months into my 5 p.m. dinner transformation. I was feeling nostalgic one afternoon, missing my grandmother's kitchen and the late-night dinners of my childhood. And I confessed to Susan that I sometimes felt guilty for abandoning my Italian traditions. She looked at me with that gentle smile of hers and said, "Honey, you haven't abandoned your traditions. You've just made them your own. You're still Italian. You still cook Italian food. You still love your family. The only thing that's changed is the time on the clock." And you know what? She was right. I was still Italian. I was still cooking the recipes that my grandmother had taught me, still using the olive oil and garlic and fresh herbs that I grew up with, still sharing stories about my family and my culture with my new American family. The only difference was that I was doing it at 5 p.m. instead of 9 p.m. And that difference, I realized, was not a betrayal. It was an evolution. Michael's American habits were not something to be overcome or corrected. They were something to be understood and appreciated. They were a window into his world, into the childhood that had shaped him into the wonderful man I had married. And by learning to appreciate those habits, I was also learning to love him more deeply, to understand him more fully, to build a stronger and more resilient marriage. The 5 p.m. dinner taught me that. It taught me that love is not about being right or wrong, about having the correct traditions or the proper schedule. It is about showing up, being present, and sharing your life with the people you care about. It is about finding common ground, even when the ground beneath your feet feels foreign and strange. And it is about being willing to change, to adapt, to grow into something new and beautiful together. So, if you are watching this video right now, and you are struggling with cultural differences in your own relationships, whether it is dinner times or language barriers or any of the other, 1,000 ways that two people can be different, I want you to know that it is okay to struggle. It is okay to feel frustrated and confused and even a little bit angry. But do not let those feelings close your heart. Stay curious. Ask questions. Listen to the stories of the people you love. And remember that every culture, every tradition, every habit has a history and a meaning that may not be immediately obvious. Take the time to understand. Take the time to appreciate. And take the time to find the common ground that will bring you closer together. Because at the end of the day, the 5 p.m. dinner is not just about food. It is about family. It is about love. It is about the beautiful, messy, complicated work of building a life with someone from a different world. And that, my friends, is a journey worth taking. But our story is not over yet. Because the 5 p.m. dinner was about to teach me one more lesson, one that I never expected, and that would change everything I thought I knew about my marriage and my family. Culture clash at the table. Now, let me take you to the dinner table where the real fireworks happened. Not the kind of fireworks that light up the sky on the 4th of July, but the kind that explode between two people who love each other deeply, but cannot seem to agree on something as simple as when to eat, what to eat, and how to eat it. Because here's the truth that I have not yet told you. The 5 p.m. dinner was not just a source of personal struggle for me. It was a source of tension in my marriage. It was a source of arguments, misunderstandings, and more than a few nights of going to bed angry. Each of us convinced that we were right, and the other was being completely unreasonable. And I want to be honest with you about those moments, because I think they're the moments that most of us experience when we are trying to bridge a cultural divide. And I think it is important to acknowledge that this journey is not always pretty. There were nights when I would sit at the table, staring at my plate, and I would think, I cannot do this. I cannot pretend that this is normal. I cannot smile and nod and act like everything is fine when everything feels so wrong. And there were nights when Michael would look at me with that patient expression of his and say, "Honey, it's just dinner. Why does it have to be so complicated?" And those words, "Why does it have to be so complicated?" would make me want to throw my fork across the room because they felt so dismissive, so reductive, so completely blind to the depth of what I was experiencing. I remember one particular evening that stands out in my memory like a vivid, painful photograph. It was about 4 months into our marriage, and I had been trying so hard to adapt to the 5 p.m. schedule. I had been cooking Italian meals, setting the table with care, and trying to slow down the pace of the meal. But on this particular night, something snapped. I had spent the whole afternoon making a beautiful lasagna from scratch, layers of fresh pasta, rich bolognese sauce, creamy bechamel, and plenty of Parmesan cheese. It was a labor of love, a recipe that my grandmother had taught me when I was just a little girl, standing on a stool in her kitchen. My hands covered in flour. I had poured my heart into that lasagna, and I was so proud of it. But when I brought it to the table at 5 p.m., Michael looked at it, smiled, and said, "That looks great, honey, but I'm not really hungry. Can we just have something light tonight?" I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. I had spent hours making this meal, this beautiful Italian meal, and my husband, the man I loved, was telling me he did not want it. It was not just about the lasagna. It was about everything the lasagna represented. My culture, my heritage, my love, my effort, my identity. And his casual dismissal of it felt like a dismissal of all of me. I did not say anything at first. I sat down at the table, put a piece of lasagna on my plate, and ate it in silence. But the silence was heavy, charged with all the things we were not saying. And then, finally, I could not hold it in anymore. I put down my fork, looked at him, and said, "Do you even care about my culture? Do you even care about what this means to me?" He looked at me, completely taken aback, and said, "Of course I care. What are you talking about?" And I said, "You just told me you did not want the lasagna I spent all afternoon making. You just told me that my grandmother's recipe is not good enough for you. You just told me that everything I am, everything I come from, does not matter." He looked at me, genuinely confused, and said, "Honey, I didn't say that. I just said I wasn't hungry. I didn't say the lasagna wasn't good. I didn't say I didn't care about your culture. I just wasn't hungry." And in that moment, I realized that we were speaking two completely different languages, not English and Italian, but two different emotional languages. He was speaking the language of practicality. "I am not hungry, so I do not want to eat." I was speaking the language of symbolism. "I made this meal for you because I love you, and your rejection of it is a rejection of my love." Both of us were right, and both of us were completely missing the other person's point. That night, we had our first real fight about the 5 p.m. dinner. It was not a loud, screaming fight. Neither of us is the screaming type, but it was a painful, tearful, heart-wrenching fight that left both of us feeling exhausted and misunderstood. I cried. He held me. And when the tears had subsided, we sat on the couch and talked, really talked for the first time about what the 5 p.m. dinner meant to each of us. I told him about my grandmother's kitchen, about the late nights around the table, and how the 5 p.m. meal was not just a schedule, but a lifeline. He told me that for him, the 5 p.m. dinner was not about rushing through food. It was about making sure that his family had time to be together, to connect, to share their lives before the chaos of the evening pulled them in different directions. And as I listened to him, I started to see the 5 p.m. dinner through his eyes. I started to see the love and intention behind it. I started to understand that his way of doing things was not a rejection of my way, but simply a different way of achieving the same beautiful goal. Family connection. That conversation changed everything. It did not solve all of our problems overnight. We still had arguments. We still had misunderstandings. We still had nights when we looked at each other across the table and felt like strangers. But it opened a door. It created a space for dialogue, for compromise, for understanding. We started having conversations about dinner, not just about what time to eat, but about what the meal meant to each of us, about what we wanted to share with each other, about how we could honor both of our traditions in a way that made both of us feel seen and valued. And those conversations, difficult as they sometimes were, brought us closer together. They taught us to listen to each other, to be curious about each other's experiences, to find common ground even when the ground seemed impossibly far apart. The 5 p.m. dinner, which had once been a source of conflict and tension, became a source of connection and growth. It became a regular practice of showing up for each other, of being present, of working through our differences with love and patience, and a willingness to understand. And you know what? The lasagna that I had made that night, We eventually ate it. Not at 5 p.m., not at 9 p.m., but sometime around 7:30 p.m., after our fight had resolved and our tears had dried. It was cold by then, but we heated it up, sat on the couch together, and ate it side by side, watching the sunset through the window. And it was the best lasagna I had ever made because it was a meal that had been saved by understanding, a meal that had been given a second chance by love. That is what the 5 p.m. dinner taught me, that there is always room for compromise, always room for second chances, always room to find a way forward together. It taught me that cultural differences do not have to be barriers. They can be bridges if we are willing to cross them. And that, my friends, is a lesson that I carry with me every single night when I sit down at the table with my family. But there was another lesson waiting for me, one that came from the most unexpected teachers of all, my children. And that is exactly what we will explore in the next part of the story. The children are the bridge. Now, let me introduce you to the two most unexpected teachers I have ever had, the two small humans who managed to do what months of science, research, and heartfelt conversations with my husband could not fully accomplish. They taught me how to embrace the 5 p.m. dinner with my whole heart. My children, Elena, who was 5 years old at the time, and Matteo, who was just 3, came into this world with a beautiful blend of Italian and American blood running through their veins. And they had absolutely no problem navigating the cultural divide that had been causing me so much anguish. While I was agonizing over the proper time for dinner, they were simply hungry. While I was wrestling with questions of cultural identity and tradition, they were simply happy to be sitting at the table with their family. While I was sneaking second dinners at 9 p.m. and feeling guilty about every bite, they were eating their 5 p.m. meals with joy and enthusiasm, completely unburdened by the weight of cultural expectations that I had been carrying since childhood. And watching them, observing them, learning from them, I realized that children have a wisdom that adults often lose, a wisdom that says, "This is what it is. This is what we have. Let us enjoy it." They did not care about the history of the 5 p.m. dinner, the cultural significance, or the political implications. They cared about one thing and one thing only, that they were with their family, that there was good food on the table, and that they were loved. And that simplicity, that beautiful, uncomplicated way of being in the world, was exactly what I needed to learn. I remember the first time I truly saw the 5 p.m. dinner through my children's eyes. It was a Wednesday, maybe 6 months into my journey, and I was still struggling with the transition. I was tired, stressed, and feeling particularly nostalgic for my Italian childhood. I had spent the afternoon making a simple pasta dish, nothing fancy, just spaghetti with garlic and olive oil. The kind of meal that my grandmother used to make when she was too tired to cook anything elaborate. I served it at 5 p.m., as I had learned to do, and I sat down at the table with a heavy heart, missing the late-night dinners of my past. But then, something magical happened. Elena looked at her plate, took a big bite of spaghetti, and said, "Mama, this is the best dinner ever." Matteo, who was struggling with his fork in that adorable way that toddlers do, looked up at me with his big brown eyes and said, "More, please." And in that moment, I realized that my children did not care that we were eating at 5 p.m. They did not care that this meal was not the elaborate, hours-long feast of my Italian childhood. They did not care that the sun was still shining outside. They cared about one thing and one thing only, that their mother had made them dinner, that they were sitting with their family, and that they were happy. And their happiness was so pure, so genuine, so completely uncomplicated, that it broke through the wall of resistance that I had been building around my heart. That night, after the children had gone to bed, I sat on the couch with my husband and I said, "Michael, I think I finally understand." He looked at me, curious, and I said, Our children do not see the 5 p.m. dinner as a problem. They see it as an opportunity. They see it as time with us. And I have been so focused on what I was losing that I completely missed what I was gaining. He smiled, that warm, patient smile that I had come to love so much, and said, "I have been trying to tell you that for months." And he was right. He had been telling me, in his own quiet, patient way, that the 5 p.m. dinner was not something to be fought against, but something to be embraced. But I had not been ready to hear it. I had needed to see it through my children's eyes. I had needed to witness their joy, their simplicity, their complete lack of cultural baggage, to truly understand what the 5 p.m. dinner could mean. And that is when everything started to change. I stopped fighting the 5 p.m. dinner and started embracing it. I stopped seeing it as a betrayal of my Italian heritage and started seeing it as a gift to my children. I stopped mourning the late-night dinners of my past and started celebrating the early dinners of my present. I started involving my children in the cooking, teaching them the Italian recipes that my grandmother had taught me, but adapting them to the 5 p.m. schedule. We would start cooking at 3:30 p.m., rolling pasta and chopping vegetables together, and by 5 p.m., we would be sitting down to eat, our hands covered in flour and our hearts full of joy. My children loved it. They loved the time in the kitchen, the stories I would tell them about Italy, the way the food brought us together. And I loved watching them learn, watching them connect with their Italian heritage in a way that was not burdened by the same cultural baggage that I had carried for so long. But the children did more than just help me embrace the 5 p.m. dinner. They helped me heal the tension in my marriage. Because here is what I realized: when I was fighting the 5 p.m. dinner, I was also fighting my husband. When I was resisting the early dinner schedule, I was also resisting his culture, his family, his way of life. And that resistance was creating a distance between us, a distance that I did not even fully recognize until I started to let go. But when I started to embrace the 5 p.m. dinner, when I started to see it through my children's eyes, something shifted in my marriage. I became more open, more flexible, more willing to meet my husband where he was. And he, in turn, became more willing to meet me where I was. He started asking more questions about Italian food, about Italian culture, about the traditions that were so important to me. He started cooking with me, learning my grandmother's recipes, and sharing in the joy of the kitchen. The 5 p.m. dinner, which had once been a source of conflict, became a source of connection. It became a daily practice of coming together, of honoring both of our cultures, of building something new and beautiful that was uniquely ours. And the children, those incredible little bridges between two worlds, were the ones who made it all possible. They did not judge. They did not resist. They did not cling to one tradition over another. They simply opened their hearts and their minds and their stomachs to whatever was placed before them, and in doing so, they showed me how to do the same. They showed me that cultural identity is not a fixed thing, not a static inheritance that you must protect at all costs. It is a living, breathing, evolving thing that grows and changes with you. It is something that you can share, adapt, and transform without losing the essence of who you are. My children are Italian and American. They eat pasta and hamburgers. They speak English and Italian. They celebrate American holidays and Italian holidays. And they are completely, beautifully whole. They do not see a conflict between these two identities. They see a richness. They see a gift. And watching them, I started to see the same thing. So if you are watching this video right now, and you are struggling with cultural differences in your own life, whether it is dinner times, language, or any of the 1,000 other ways that two cultures can collide, I want you to look to your children if you have them. Or look to the children in your life. Watch how they move through the world with such openness, such curiosity, such willingness to embrace what is new without letting go of what is familiar. They are not afraid of the 5 p.m. dinner. They are not afraid of the cultural differences. They are not afraid of the unknown. And neither should you be. Because the unknown, as I have learned, is not something to be feared. It is something to be explored. It is something to be celebrated. But there was one more lesson waiting for me, a lesson that would change not just how I felt about dinner, but how I felt about everything. And that lesson came from a completely unexpected place. New rhythm, new family. Now, let me tell you about the day when everything finally clicked into place. The day when I stopped thinking of the 5 p.m. dinner as something I was enduring and started thinking of it as something I was creating. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, about 8 months into our new family rhythm. I was in the kitchen with Elena and Matteo, making a batch of fresh pasta for our 5 p.m. dinner, when I realized that I was not thinking about Italy. I was not missing my grandmother's kitchen. I was not feeling nostalgic for the late-night dinners of my childhood. I was just present. I was rolling out the dough, watching my children's flour-covered hands, listening to their laughter, and feeling a deep, quiet contentment that I had not felt in months. And in that moment, I understood that the 5 p.m. dinner had stopped being a compromise and started being a choice. It had stopped being something I was doing to fit in and started being something I was doing because I wanted to, because it worked, because it brought my family together, because it gave us time to cook together, time to eat together, time to be together in a way that the late-night dinners of my childhood had never quite managed. And that realization was so profound, so liberating, that I felt like I had been released from a prison that I had not even known I was in. What had changed? Everything and nothing. The clock on the wall still said 5 p.m. when we sat down to eat. The sun was still shining outside. The meal was still faster than the long, leisurely dinners of my Italian childhood. But everything else had shifted. I had shifted. And what I had gained was something truly precious, a new family rhythm that honored both my Italian heritage and my American life. A rhythm that gave us time for connection, for conversation, for the simple joy of being together. I had gained a new way of being a mother, a wife, a daughter-in-law, a woman who could hold two cultures in her heart without feeling torn apart by them. I had gained a new sense of peace, a new sense of belonging, a new sense of home. And the 5 p.m. dinner, I realized, was not just about food. It was about time. In Italy, we had taken time, hours of it, to eat, to talk, to linger. But that time had come at a cost. By the time we finished dinner, it was late, and the evening was almost over. There was no time for walks, no time for games, no time for the quiet, unhurried moments that make a family feel connected. In America, the 5 p.m. dinner gave us those moments. After dinner, we still had hours of evening left. We could go for a walk around the neighborhood, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. We could play board games in the living room, with the children's laughter filling the house. We could sit on the porch and talk, just the two of us, while the children played in the yard. We could read bedtime stories, slowly and without rushing, because no one was exhausted from a late meal. The 5 p.m. dinner had not taken time away from us. It had given us time. It had given us the gift of a long, unhurried evening, a gift that I had never even realized I was missing. And that gift, I soon discovered, was not just for us. It was for our extended family as well. My mother-in-law, Susan, who had always been the heart of the 5 p.m. dinner tradition, started coming over more often. She would arrive at 4:30 p.m., help me in the kitchen, and share stories about Michael's childhood. My father-in-law, a quiet man who rarely spoke much, started opening up during these dinners, sharing memories of his own parents and their early dinner traditions. The 5 p.m. dinner became a gathering point for the whole family, a time when 3 generations could come together and share their lives. And I, the Italian woman who had once felt like an outsider, became the center of it all. I was the one cooking the pasta, setting the table, bringing the warmth and the love that made these dinners special. I was not just adapting to American culture. I was shaping it. I was infusing it with my Italian spirit, my Italian passion, my Italian heart. And in doing so, I was creating something new, something that was neither fully Italian nor fully American, but something that was entirely, beautifully our own. I think about my grandmother a lot during these dinners. I think about her kitchen in Rome, the smell of garlic and tomatoes, the sound of her voice telling stories. And I used to think that by eating at 5 p.m., I was betraying her. But now I understand that I am honoring her in the best way I can. I am keeping her recipes alive. I am passing them on to my children. I am sharing them with my American family. I am keeping her spirit alive in a new context, a new country, a new rhythm. And I believe, with all my heart, that she would be proud of me. She would be proud that I have found a way to carry her love across the ocean, across the years, across the cultural divide. She would be proud that I am making a home for my family, a home that is filled with laughter and love and good food, even if that food is served at 5 p.m. instead of 9 p.m. But the most important thing I learned from the 5 p.m. dinner is that there is no one right way to be a family. There is no one right time to eat. There is no one right culture to follow. What matters is love. What matters is connection. What matters is showing up for each other, day after day, meal after meal, year after year. And if that means eating dinner at 5 p.m., then so be it. If that means eating dinner at 9 p.m., then so be it. If that means a hybrid, a blend, a beautiful messy mixture of both, then that is even better. Because the 5 p.m. dinner taught me that family is not about rigid rules or fixed traditions. It is about flexibility. It is about adaptation. It is about finding what works for you and the people you love, and then doing it wholeheartedly and without reservation. So if you are watching this video right now and you are struggling with your own cultural differences or your own family rhythms, I want you to know that it gets better. The struggle is real, and it is painful, and there are days when you will feel like you are losing yourself. But if you keep going, if you keep showing up, if you keep opening your heart to the new and the unfamiliar, something beautiful will happen. You will find a new rhythm. You will find a new way of being. You will find a new version of yourself that is richer, more complex, more fully human than the person you were before. And that is the gift of the 5 p.m. dinner. That is the gift of any cultural transition. It is not just about learning to eat at a different time. It is about learning to live in a different way. And that, my friends, is a journey worth taking. But there is one more lesson waiting for me, one that would come from the most unexpected teacher of all, my own body. Finally accepting the new rhythm and teaching me something I never expected to learn. And that is exactly what we will explore in the next part of the story. Dinner conversations in English. Now, let me share with you something that I have not yet mentioned. Something that might surprise you given how much I have talked about food and culture and family dynamics. The 5 p.m. dinner became the most powerful English learning tool I have ever encountered. And I did not even realize it was happening until one evening when I caught myself effortlessly explaining the difference between braciole and bistecca to my mother-in-law, using words and phrases that would have made my early English teachers weep with joy. You see, when I first moved to America, I spoke English well enough to get by. I had studied it in school, watched American movies, and practiced with tutors, but I spoke it with a hesitancy, a self-consciousness, a constant fear of making mistakes that made every conversation feel like a performance. I was always second-guessing myself, always worrying about my accent, always apologizing for my imperfect grammar. But the 5 p.m. dinner changed all of that. It forced me to speak English, not in a classroom or a formal setting, but in the most natural and authentic context imaginable. Around the dinner table with my family, talking about real things, sharing real stories, expressing real emotions. And in that context, something magical happened. My English started to flow. My confidence started to grow. My fear of making mistakes started to fade away. And I realized that the 5 p.m. dinner was not just a meal. It was a language lab, a conversation workshop, a daily practice in authentic communication. I remember the first time I truly noticed the transformation. It was a Sunday evening, maybe a year into our 5 p.m. dinner routine, and we had invited my in-laws over for a special meal. I was telling them about my grandmother's recipe for pasta alla carbonara, describing the ingredients and the technique in English. And I realized that I was not pausing to search for words, not apologizing for my accent, not worrying about whether I was making grammatical mistakes. I was just talking. My mother-in-law, Susan, was leaning in, completely engaged, asking questions about the recipe. My father-in-law was nodding along, clearly interested. My husband was smiling with pride. And my children, those beautiful little bridges between two worlds, were listening with wide eyes, absorbing every word. In that moment, I felt like I had achieved something monumental, not just making a good meal, but communicating with my family in a way that felt natural and authentic and completely, wonderfully fluent. The 5 p.m. dinner had given me a gift that no textbook, no language class, no app could ever provide: the opportunity to practice English in a real, meaningful, low-stakes environment where the focus was not on my language skills but on the connection we were building with each other. And the beauty of it was that I did not have to force it. I did not have to sit down with a grammar book or a vocabulary list. I did not have to memorize phrases or practice pronunciation drills. All I had to do was show up at the table, day after day, and be present with my family. The conversations happened naturally about work, about school, about the children's activities, about plans for the weekend, about memories from the past, and hopes for the future. We talked about everything and nothing, the kind of meandering, unstructured conversations that are the lifeblood of family life. And in those conversations, I absorbed English like a sponge. I learned new words and phrases without even trying. I developed a feel for the rhythm and cadence of American English. I internalized the grammar and syntax in a way that no amount of formal study could have achieved. The 5 p.m. dinner was not a language lesson. It was a language immersion, and it worked better than anything I had ever tried before. But the language learning was not a one-way street. My family, in turn, started learning Italian from me. My children, who were already bilingual, would switch between English and Italian at the table, sometimes mid-sentence. Sometimes just to practice a new word or phrase they had learned. My husband, who had studied Italian in college but had never really used it, started picking up phrases from me and my children. He would say grazie when I passed him the salt, delizioso when he tasted something particularly good, and ti amo when he wanted to express his love in my native tongue. Even my in-laws started learning. Susan would ask me how to say certain words in Italian, and she would practice them at the table, sometimes butchering the pronunciation in a way that made us all laugh. The 5 p.m. dinner had become a cultural exchange, a daily celebration of the beautiful blending of our two worlds. And the language was the thread that wove it all together. I think about the science behind this sometimes. When you learn a language in a classroom, you're learning it in a way that is abstract, detached from real life. The words and grammar are taught as isolated units, disconnected from the messy reality of human communication. But when you learn a language in context, around the dinner table with people you love, discussing things that matter. It sticks. It becomes part of you. It becomes something you can use without thinking, something that flows naturally from your heart and your mind. That is what the 5 p.m. dinner gave me. It gave me a context for language learning that was rich, authentic, and emotionally meaningful. It gave me a reason to speak English, a reason to listen, a reason to keep trying even when I made mistakes. And it gave me the gift of confidence, the belief that I could communicate, really communicate, with my new family and my new community. And here is the thing that I did not expect. The 5 p.m. dinner also improved my listening skills. In Italy, I was used to being the one who talked, the one who told stories, the one who dominated the conversation. But at the American dinner table, I learned to listen. I learned to pay attention to the rhythms of American speech, the idioms and expressions that are so different from Italian, the cultural references and assumptions that I needed to understand in order to truly connect. I learned to listen not just to the words, but to the meaning behind them, the emotions and intentions that are the true heart of any conversation. And in doing so, I became a better communicator, a better wife, a better mother, a better daughter-in-law. The 5 p.m. dinner taught me that language is not just about words. It is about connection. It is about understanding. It is about being present with the people you love, no matter what language you're speaking. So if you are watching this video right now and you are learning English or any language for that matter, I want you to think about the dinner table. Think about the conversations you can have, the connections you can build, the language you can absorb without even trying. Do not wait for a classroom. Do not wait for a textbook. Do not wait for the perfect moment. Start now, right where you are, with the people around you. Talk about your day. Talk about your dreams. Talk about your fears. Talk about the food on your plate. It does not matter if you make mistakes. It does not matter if your accent is not perfect. It does not matter if you stumble over words and forget what you wanted to say. What matters is that you keep showing up, keep talking, keep listening, keep connecting. Because that is how language is truly learned. That is how language becomes a part of you. And that is exactly what the 5 p.m. dinner taught me. But there was one more gift that it gave me, a gift that I never expected and that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. And that is what we will explore in the next part of this story. My clock finally adjusts. Now, let me tell you about the moment I truly knew, that my Italian body had finally surrendered to the American rhythm. The moment when I looked at the clock at 5 p.m. and felt not resistance or resentment, but a quiet, familiar hunger that felt as natural as breathing. It happened on a Tuesday, an ordinary Tuesday with nothing special about it, which is exactly why it was so extraordinary. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for that night's dinner, when I realized that I was not thinking about what time it was. I was not checking the clock. I was not calculating how many hours until my next meal. I was just cooking. And when I glanced at the clock on the microwave and saw that it was 4:45 p.m., my stomach rumbled, not with a confused, disoriented hunger of those early months, but with a clear, confident, unmistakable signal that it was almost time to eat. I stopped chopping for a moment and just stood there, letting the realization wash over me. My body had adjusted. My clock had finally changed. The 5 p.m. dinner was no longer something I was forcing myself to do. It was something my body expected, something it craved, something that felt as natural and right as the late-night dinners of my Italian childhood had once felt. And in that moment, I felt a wave of emotions so powerful that I had to sit down. I thought about the journey that had brought me to this point, the months of struggle, the nights of sneaking second dinners, the arguments with my husband, the tears, the confusion, the sense of loss that had felt so overwhelming. I thought about my grandmother's kitchen, the late-night dinners, the feeling of being connected to something ancient and beautiful and unchangeable. And I thought about how far I had come, how much I had grown, how much I had changed without losing the essence of who I was. The 5 p.m. dinner had not taken my Italian identity away from me. It had added to it. It had expanded it. It had shown me that I could be Italian and American, that I could love pasta and pot roast, that I could honor my grandmother's recipes and my mother-in-law's traditions, that I could find a way to be fully myself in a context that was completely different from anything I had ever known. But the adjustment was not just psychological. It was physical. I had read about the science of circadian rhythms and digestion, but it was only when I experienced it for myself that I truly understood what it meant. My body had learned to produce stomach acid at 4:30 p.m., to release digestive enzymes at 5 p.m., to metabolize food efficiently in the early evening, and to slow down in preparation for sleep by 9 p.m. I slept better than I had in years. I had more energy during the day. I felt lighter, more alert, more present in my own life. The 5 p.m. dinner had not just changed my schedule. It had changed my health. It had changed my relationship with food. It had changed my relationship with my body. And in doing so, it had changed my relationship with myself. I started to notice other changes as well. I stopped craving late-night snacks. I stopped waking up in the middle of the night with indigestion. I stopped feeling bloated and tired in the mornings. My skin looked clearer. My mood was more stable. I had more patience with my children, more energy for my husband, more joy in my daily life. The 5 p.m. dinner had given me a gift that I never expected, a gift of health and vitality that I had not even realized I was missing. And I thought about all the years I had spent eating late dinners, all the years I had unknowingly strained my digestive system, all the years I had ignored the signals my body was sending me because I was too attached to a cultural tradition to listen. The 5 p.m. dinner had not just changed my clock. It had freed me. It had freed me from the burden of doing things a certain way just because they had always been done that way. It had freed me to listen to my body, to honor its needs, to find a rhythm that worked for me and my family. And in that freedom, I found something I had been looking for my whole life. Peace.
Peace with my past.
Peace with my present. Peace with the beautiful, messy, complicated reality of being an Italian woman living in America, married to an American man, raising American-Italian children. Peace with the fact that I would never be fully one thing or the other, that I would always carry both cultures in my heart, that my identity would always be a hybrid, a blend, a beautiful mosaic of everything I had ever been and everything I was becoming. The 5 p.m. dinner taught me that peace is not about choosing one thing over another. It is about embracing all of it, the joy and the struggle, the connection and the confusion, the past and the present, and finding a way to hold it all with love. I started to see the 5 p.m. dinner differently. I stopped seeing it as a concession, a compromise, a loss. I started seeing it as a choice, a gift that I was giving to myself and to my family. I started seeing it as a ritual, not the ritual of my Italian grandmother, but a new ritual, a ritual that was uniquely ours. I started seeing it as a time of connection, a time of nourishment, a time of love. And I found a way to be Italian in America, a way to honor my heritage without being trapped by it, a way to embrace my new life without abandoning my old one. It was not easy.
It took time.
It took patience. It took a willingness to let go of things that I had held onto for so long. But in the end, it was worth it. It was so worth it. If you are watching this video right now, and you are struggling with your own transition, whether it is a cultural transition, a language transition, or any other kind of change, I want you to know that it is possible. It is possible to adjust. It is possible to grow. It is possible to find a new rhythm that feels right for you. It will not happen overnight. It will not be easy. There will be days when you want to give up, days when you feel like you are losing yourself, days when you wonder if it is even worth it. But if you keep going, if you keep showing up, if you keep opening your heart to the new and the unfamiliar, you will eventually find your way. You will eventually find your rhythm. You will eventually find your peace. The 5 p.m. dinner taught me that. It taught me that change is not something to be feared, but something to be embraced. And it taught me that love for yourself, love for your family, love for your new life, is the most powerful force of all. But there is one more gift that the 5 p.m. dinner gave me, one more lesson that I want to share with you before this story ends. And that is the most important lesson of all. And that is exactly what we will explore in the final part of this journey. A happy ending at the dinner table. Now, let me bring this story full circle and tell you about the dinner that finally, completely, and irrevocably convinced me that the 5 p.m. dinner was not just a compromise, but a gift that had transformed my life, my marriage, my family, and my understanding of who I am. 20 people, 3 generations, 2 cultures, and one very ambitious Italian woman who had decided that she was going to cook a feast that would honor both her American family and her Italian heritage. I started cooking at 8 a.m. that morning, with Elena and Matteo by my side, their little hands helping me peel potatoes and mix stuffing. By 2 p.m., the house smelled like heaven: roasted turkey, garlic and herbs, freshly baked bread, and the unmistakable aroma of my grandmother's pasta sauce simmering on the stove. By 4 p.m., the guests started arriving: my in-laws, Michael's aunts and uncles, his cousins and their children, all of them curious to see what the Italian woman would serve for an American Thanksgiving. And at exactly 5 p.m., we all sat down at the table. 20 people, crowded around a table that we had extended with every leaf and board we could find, laughing and talking and passing dishes to each other. And in that moment, looking around at the faces of my family, my American family, my Italian family, my family, I felt a wave of gratitude so powerful that I could barely speak. The meal was a perfect blend of both worlds. There was the traditional Thanksgiving turkey, golden and juicy, surrounded by all the classic American sides: mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce, and pumpkin pie. But there was also my grandmother's pasta, served as a first course because in Italy, pasta is not optional. There was a salad with fresh mozzarella and tomatoes because in Italy, every meal needs something fresh and light. There was a platter of roasted vegetables drizzled with olive oil and balsamic vinegar because in Italy, vegetables are never an afterthought. And there was wine, good Italian wine, flowing freely because in Italy, wine is not just a drink but a celebration. The table was a mosaic of cultures, a testament to the beautiful blending of 2 worlds, and as I looked around at the smiling faces of my family, I realized that this right here was the happy ending that I had never even known I was looking for. But the real magic happened after dinner. The table was cleared, the dishes were washed, and the children were sent off to play. The adults gathered in the living room, sipping coffee and digestivo, sharing stories and laughter. Watching my father-in-law nod along with a gentle smile, watching my children play with their cousins, watching this beautiful, messy, imperfect family that I had been so fortunate to find. And I thought about all the struggles, all the tears, all the arguments, all the nights when I had felt like giving up. I thought about my Italian grandmother, who had taught me to love food and family with all my heart. I thought about my American mother-in-law, who had welcomed me with open arms and taught me that love knows no culture. And I thought about my husband, who had stood by me through all of it, patient and kind and willing to grow with me. The 5 p.m. dinner had brought us all together. It had given us time to talk, time to listen, time to love. And in that time, we had built something beautiful. A family that was stronger than any cultural divide, a love that was deeper than any difference, a home that was truly, wonderfully ours. And this, my friends, is the message I want to leave you with. The 5 p.m. dinner changed my life. It changed my clock. It changed my health. It changed my marriage. It changed my relationship with my children, my in-laws, and myself. It is something to be celebrated, because change is not about losing who you are. It is about becoming who you can be. It is about growing, adapting, and finding new ways to love and connect. Whether you are learning English, adapting to a new culture, navigating a new relationship, or simply trying to find your place in the world, I want you to know that you can do it. You can find your rhythm. You can find your peace. You can find your happy ending. It will not be easy. It will take time. There will be struggles and setbacks and moments when you want to give up. But if you keep going, if you keep showing up, if you keep opening your heart to the new and the unfamiliar, you will find your way. You will find your table. You will find your family. And you will find the love that makes it all worthwhile. So tonight, when you sit down to dinner, whether it is at 5 p.m., 7 p.m., 9 p.m., or any other time, I want you to remember this story. I want you to remember that the time on the clock does not matter nearly as much as the love around the table. I want you to remember that every meal is an opportunity to connect, to share, to grow. And I want you to remember that no matter where you come from, no matter what language you speak, no matter what culture you carry in your heart, you belong. You belong at this table. You belong in this world. You belong in the beautiful, messy, wonderful story of life. And that, my friends, is the most important lesson of all. The 5 p.m. dinner taught me that. It taught me that love is the one language that everyone speaks. It taught me that family is not about blood or tradition or where you come from. It is about showing up day after day and choosing to love each other, no matter what time the clock says. It taught me that the best meals are not the ones that take the longest to cook, but the ones that are shared with the people you love. And it taught me that happiness is not about getting everything right. It is about getting it all together. The pasta and the turkey, the Italian wine and the American pie, the laughter and the tears, the past and the present, and finding a way to make it all work one meal at a time. So as I look at my family now, my beautiful, blended, wonderfully imperfect family, I feel nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for the journey. Gratitude for the struggle. Gratitude for the 5 p.m. dinner that brought us all together. And I know deep in my heart that this is exactly where I am supposed to be. This is my happy ending. And I hope with all my heart that you find yours too, because you deserve it. You deserve love. You deserve connection. You deserve a seat at the table. And no matter what time that table is set, I promise you this, the love will always be there, waiting for you, ready to fill your heart and your home and your life with joy. That is the gift of the 5 p.m. dinner. That is the gift of family. That is the gift of love. And that, my friends, is the most beautiful ending of all. And this is where this story brings me, to a place I never imagined I would find, to a truth I never expected to discover, to a peace I never knew I was searching for. The 5 p.m. dinner, that seemingly simple and ordinary American tradition, became the unexpected teacher of my life's most profound lessons. It taught me that culture is not a cage but a canvas, that identity is not a fixed destination but a beautiful, evolving journey, and that love, real. It taught me that the most important moments in life often happen in the most ordinary settings. A kitchen, a table, a family gathered together, sharing a meal and their lives with each other. And it taught me that home is not a place you find, but a place you build. One meal, one conversation, one moment of love at a time. But here's the question I want to leave with you, the question that has been burning in my heart throughout this entire journey. What is your 5 p.m. dinner? What is the thing in your life that seems foreign or difficult or impossible, but that might actually be the key to your own transformation? What is the change you are resisting, the challenge you are avoiding, the new rhythm you are afraid to embrace? Because I promise you this, whatever it is, it might just hold the gift you have been waiting for. It might just be the thing that teaches you, heals you, and helps you become the person you are meant to be. The 5 p.m. dinner was that thing for me. It was the challenge that forced me to grow, the change that helped me heal, and the new rhythm that brought my family closer together. And I believe, with all my heart, that there is a 5 p.m. dinner waiting for you too. It might not be a meal. It might be a language, a culture, a relationship, a career, or a dream. But whatever it is, I hope you will embrace it. I hope you will give it a chance. I hope you will let it transform you, just as the 5 p.m. dinner transformed me. And now, I want to ask you for something. If this story has touched your heart, if it has made you think, if it has given you hope or encouragement or a new way of seeing the world, I want you to do 3 things for me. First, hit that like button, because every like tells me that this story matters to you. Second, share this video with someone you love, someone who might be going through their own cultural transition, someone who might be struggling with change, someone who needs to hear that it is possible to find your way, no matter how lost you feel right now. And third, subscribe to this channel because I have so many more stories to share, so many more lessons to teach, so many more journeys to take you on. I am going to keep making videos like this, stories that will help you practice your English, understand American culture, and find your own path through the beautiful, messy, complicated adventure of life. But I cannot do it without you. I need you to be part of this community. I need you to show up, to engage, to share your own stories and experiences. Because this is not just my story. It is our story. It is the story of everyone who has ever felt like a stranger in a new place, who has ever struggled to find their footing. And together, we can create a space where everyone feels welcome, where everyone feels seen, where everyone feels at home. So please join me. Hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. And get ready for more stories that will help you learn, grow, and transform. Because this is just the beginning. There are so many more meals to share, so many more lessons to learn, so many more beautiful moments to experience together. And I cannot wait to share them all with you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this journey. And remember, no matter where you are, no matter what time your dinner table is set, you are never alone. You are always welcome at this table. And there is always a seat waiting for you right here with us. Like this video if you enjoyed this story and want more content like this. Share your own story of cultural adaptation. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today. Join our community and let's learn, grow, and transform together. One meal, one story, one moment at a time. See you at the table.